I found the recording on a Tuesday, not because I was looking for it. I want to be clear about that. I was looking for the source of a smell. We'd moved into 4 Hargrove Lane 6 weeks earlier, my wife Ellen and I, and the smell had started around week 3, faint at first, like old pennies left in a damp pocket, then sharper. Then it became the kind of thing you notice when you stop talking, when you're brushing your teeth, when you wake up at 3 a.m. and the house is doing that thing houses do, where they settle into their real shape. That wet copper smell would be right there, close to my face, as though the walls were exhaling. The landlord said it was probably a dead mouse in the insulation. He said it like he was reading from a script, like he'd said it before. I didn't think much of that at the time. I'm a decent enough handyman, so I told Ellen I'd open up part of the wall in the upstairs hallway, where the smell seemed strongest. She was fine with it. She was more than fine with it. She had stopped sleeping well, and I think the smell was part of why, though she never said so directly. She just kept washing the sheets. I cut into the drywall on a Tuesday afternoon. Clean rectangle, about 2 feet wide, 18 inches tall. I used a utility knife and a small pry bar, and I was careful because I didn't want to hit wiring. The drywall came away easy. Too easy, actually. The edges were soft, like the moisture in the wall had been working on them for a long time. Behind the drywall was standard insulation, pink fiberglass, craft paper backing, and behind that, I expected studs and maybe the back of the exterior sheathing. What I found was a small plastic bag, the kind you'd use for a sandwich, sealed with a strip of electrical tape. Inside the bag was a digital voice recorder. It was a Sony model, black, maybe 10 years old, the kind with a small LCD screen and a slide switch on the side. The screen was dead, but when I turned it over, I noticed 2 things. The battery compartment had been taped shut, and someone had scratched into the plastic casing with what looked like the tip of a nail, the number 4. Our house number, 4 Hargrove Lane. I brought it downstairs. Ellen was on the back porch, reading. I didn't show it to her right away. I'm not sure why. Maybe because the thing felt private in a way I couldn't explain, like finding someone's journal. Maybe because I didn't want to worry her before I knew what it was. I told myself I'd listen to it first, decide if it was worth mentioning. I took it into the garage, peeled the tape off the battery compartment, 2 AAA batteries inside, both corroded at the contacts. I cleaned the contacts with vinegar and a cotton swab, put in fresh batteries from the junk drawer, and powered it on. The LCD screen flickered, showed a pale blue rectangle, then loaded. 1 file, 17 minutes and 43 seconds long. I pressed play. For the first few seconds, there was nothing. Room tone, the faint hiss of a recording made in a quiet, enclosed space. Then, a man started speaking. His voice was calm. Not calm like someone who's at peace. Calm like someone who's decided something. There's a difference, and I recognized it immediately. My father sounded like that the last time I spoke to him before he checked himself into a facility. It's the calm of a person who has stopped fighting whatever they're fighting. The man said, "This is for whoever finds this. I lived in this house for 11 years. I'm recording this because by the time you hear it, I will have moved. And I need someone else to know what I know, because knowing it alone is the thing that's been making me sick." He paused. I heard him swallow. The houses on this street were all built in the same year, 1987, by the same developer. 16 houses, both sides. I've been inside all of them, not broken in. I was invited. Dinners, parties, helping someone fix a deck. Normal things. And in every single one, at some point in the last 11 years, I've heard the sound. You probably haven't heard it yet, or maybe you have, and you explained it away. That's what I did for the first 3 years. Another pause. Longer this time. It happens between 2 and 4 a.m. It's not every night. It's maybe once a week, sometimes less. It sounds like someone dragging a single finger along the inside of your wall. Slowly. From about waist height up to the ceiling. One long stroke. Then it stops. I paused the recording. My hands were doing something. Not shaking, exactly, but buzzing, the way they do when your blood pressure does something sudden. Because I had heard that sound. I'd heard it twice, both times. In the first week, both times, I'd written it off as the house settling, pipes contracting in the cold, the 100 rational explanations your brain hands you when you don't want to think about the alternative. I pressed play again. I started asking the neighbors. Not directly. I'm not a fool. I asked the way you ask about anything you're embarrassed about. I framed it as a joke. You ever hear anything weird in your walls at night? That kind of thing. And every single person I asked reacted the same way. They laughed, and then they stopped laughing, and then they changed the subject. Every one of them, like they'd all agreed on the same response without ever discussing it. The man's voice tightened slightly. After 5 years, I couldn't stand it anymore. I brought it up directly to Gerald, my next-door neighbor. Gerald and I were close. We watched football together every Sunday. I trusted him. I sat in his kitchen, and I said, "Gerald, I hear something in my walls at night, and I think you hear it too." And Gerald, and I will never forget this. Gerald set his coffee down very carefully, and he looked at me, and he said, "We don't talk about that, David. That's one of the things we don't talk about." And I said, "One of the things," and Gerald said, "Go home, David." The recording hissed for a moment. I could hear the man, David, breathing. I should have left it there, I know that. Anyone listening to this is probably thinking, why didn't you just leave it there? But you need to understand what it's like to hear something impossible in your own walls and have every person around you silently confirm that they hear it too and still refuse to acknowledge it. It makes you feel like the ground under your life is fake, like you've been standing on a painted floor over a pit and you've just noticed the brush strokes. I stopped the recording again, went inside. Ellen was still on the porch. I got a glass of water and drank it at the kitchen sink, looking at the wall in front of me. The kitchen wall, just drywall painted eggshell white by a previous tenant. Ordinary. I put my palm flat against it. It was cool, the way walls are. Nothing else. I went back to the garage and pressed play. About 6 years in, I started doing research on the developer. His name was Arthur Maron. He built the entire street, all 16 houses, through a company called Maron and Hollis Developments. Hollis was a silent partner, a money man. Maron was the builder. He oversaw everything: foundation, framing, electrical, plumbing, finishing. He was known for being hands-on, obsessive actually. He insisted on certain things that were unusual for a residential developer. He poured the foundations himself with his own crew, and he wouldn't let subcontractors do the interior wall framing. That was all him. A pause. I found old permits, county records, a few newspaper clippings from the local paper. This was before everything was digital, so I spent a lot of time in the municipal archive. And I found something that didn't make sense. According to the building permits, each house on Hargrove Lane has a standard layout: 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, attached garage. But according to the original blueprints, which I found in a filing cabinet in the basement of the county records office, misfiled under a different subdivision, each house has an additional interior space. Not a room exactly, more like a channel, a narrow void between the interior walls that runs vertically through the center of the house, from the foundation to the attic. It's not on the permits. It's not on the inspection records. It's only on the original blueprints, and those blueprints were supposed to have been destroyed after final inspection. My stomach did something when he said that. It folded over on itself in a way that wasn't nausea exactly, but was in the same family. A channel, a void inside the walls. The channel is about 14 inches wide, too narrow for a person, but not too narrow for, and I want to be careful how I say this, not too narrow for something to move through it. I know how that sounds, believe me, but I measured my own walls. I opened them up in 3 places, and the channel is there. It's real. It runs from a sealed space beneath the foundation slab up through the wall cavity and into a capped void in the attic. And the interior surface of the channel, the surface you'd never see unless you tore the walls apart, is not drywall. It's not wood. It's something smooth, almost tight, like it was cast or poured or grown. And it's warm. Even in winter, that surface is warm. The recording went quiet for almost 30 seconds. I could hear David breathing. Then, quieter than before, he continued. I don't know what Maren put in these houses. I don't know what the channel is for. But I'll tell you what I do know, because these are facts, not theories. Fact. Every family that has lived on this street longer than 2 years reports better sleep than they've ever had in their lives. Except for the one night a week when the sound happens, and on that night, they report nightmares they can't remember. Fact. The turnover rate on this street is almost 0. People move in and they don't leave. The average tenure is 14 years. Fact. I pulled dental records for 6 residents, including myself, and all 6 showed the same anomaly. A slight increase in bone density in the jaw and skull over the period of residence. Fact. I have gained 11 pounds since I moved in, and I eat less than I did before. Not fat, dense. My doctor called it unusual lean mass accumulation. He didn't have an explanation. A sharp breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. And the last fact, the one that made me decide to leave. I was in the attic, looking for the top of the channel. I found it. It was capped with a piece of that same smooth material, slightly convex, like the top of a skull. And I put my ear against it, and I heard breathing. Not from inside the house, not from outside, from inside the channel. Slow, deep, and rhythmic. And it was synchronized with my own breathing. When I held my breath, it held. When I exhaled, it exhaled. And when I pulled my ear away and looked at the surface of the cap, I swear there was condensation on it, in the exact shape of a human ear, but reversed, like something on the other side had been pressing its ear to the same spot at the same time. The recording stopped. Not ended, stopped, mid-silence. The file was 17 minutes and 43 seconds, and at 17 minutes and 43 seconds, it cut off as though the recorder had been switched off in the middle of a moment. No goodbye, no final warning, no dramatic last line. I sat in the garage for a long time after that. The reasonable part of my brain, the part that had gotten me through 41 years of life without ever believing in anything I couldn't touch, immediately began doing its job. The man was disturbed. The man was paranoid. the man had found a construction anomaly and woven a conspiracy around it. People hear sounds in old houses. People gain weight. Dental records have natural variations. All of this was explicable, but there was a feeling underneath the reasoning that wouldn't go away. A feeling like the ground under my life had just shown me its brushstrokes. That night, I didn't tell Ellen. I made dinner. We watched something on the television. She went to bed at 10:30, and I told her I'd be up soon. Instead, I went to the upstairs hallway where I'd cut the wall open. I hadn't patched it yet. I got a flashlight and looked into the cavity. Standard insulation. Standard studs. But beyond the studs, if I angled the flashlight, I could see the back of the opposite wall. And between the studs and that back wall, there was more space than there should have been. Not a lot more, but enough that I noticed. The stud cavity should have been about 3.5 inches deep. This looked like it was closer to 18 inches, maybe more, as though the wall was thicker than it appeared from either side of the room. I put my hand into the cavity, past the insulation, past the studs. My arm went in up to the elbow before my fingertips touched the back surface, and the back surface was smooth. Not drywall smooth, smooth like glass that had been breathed on. And it was warm. I pulled my arm out fast enough to scrape my forearm on the edge of the drywall. A thin line of blood welled up. I stared at it, and then I stared at the hole in the wall, and I had a thought that I didn't want to have. I was afraid that the wall had tasted me. That's not rational. I know it's not rational, but the fear was physical. It was in my teeth and in my spine and in the flat bottoms of my feet, and it was the most certain I have ever been of anything in my life. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with the lights on, and I listened to the house, and the house was quiet, and the quiet was the worst part, because it felt like the quiet of something waiting. The next morning I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went to talk to the neighbors. I started with the house directly to our left, number 6. A woman named Catherine Parr, mid-60s, retired teacher. She'd been on the street since 1994. She answered the door with a smile that was already in place before she opened it, like she'd seen me coming through the peephole and had assembled her face before turning the knob. I made small talk, complimented her garden. Then I said, as casually as I could manage, "Have you ever noticed anything strange about the walls in these houses?" The smile stayed exactly where it was, but her eyes did something. They flattened, like a screen being switched off behind glass that remains illuminated. "These are well-built homes," she said. "Arthur Merrin was a very careful man. Did you know him?" Everyone knew Arthur. She said it the way people say things they've said 100 times. He cared about this street. He cared about the people who lived here. Where is he now? He passed, she said. 2003. Hard. Very sudden. And then she added, in a tone that didn't match anything in the conversation, "We were all very grateful to him." I thanked her and left. As I walked back to my house, I glanced over my shoulder. She was still in the doorway, watching me, still smiling, and I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. Her posture. She was standing with one hand flat against the interior wall of her entryway, palm pressed to it, the way you might rest your hand on someone's shoulder, casually, affectionately. I visited 3 more houses that day. Number 8 was a couple in their 50s, Phil and Donna Gerber, lived there since 2001. Number 10 was a single man named Ray Calloway, early 70s, resident since 1991, nearly the beginning. Number 12 was a younger couple the Okafor Henrys, who'd moved in about 4 years ago. Every single one of them responded to my question the same way. Not the same words, the same architecture of response. Smile, flatness behind the eyes, a compliment about the houses or the street, a reference to Arthur Maron, an expression of something that landed halfway between gratitude and reverence. And when I left each house, each person watched me from their doorway with one hand on the wall. Neka Okafor Henry, the youngest of the group, was the only one who cracked. Just barely. As I was leaving, she called after me. "You'll understand soon." Everyone does. After the first year, her husband pulled her inside before she could say anything else. I heard him whisper something. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was the tone you use with someone who's broken a rule. That night, at 2:47 a.m., I heard it, the sound David described on the recording. A single, slow drag along the inside of the bedroom wall, from about the height of the mattress up to the ceiling, like a finger, like one long, deliberate stroke. It lasted about 4 seconds. Then it stopped, and in the silence that followed, I heard Ellen make a sound in her sleep. Not a word, not a moan, but a sigh. A deep, satisfied sigh, like someone sinking into a warm bath. And she rolled toward the wall and pressed her back against it. And even in the dark, I could see her relax in a way she never did when she was awake. Every muscle in her body softened. I didn't move. I lay there with my eyes open, and I felt the mattress beneath me, and I felt the pillow under my head, and I felt the house around me. And for the first time, I understood what David meant about the breathing, because I could feel it, not hear it, feel it. A rhythm in the structure of the house itself, in the joists and the drywall and the foundation. A slow, deep pulse that was synchronized with my own heartbeat. And when I held my breath, the pulse held. And when I exhaled, the house exhaled. And the copper smell was everywhere. And it wasn't the smell of something dead. It was the smell of something that was alive and circulating. I got out of bed. Ellen didn't stir. I walked to the wall and put my hand flat against it, the way Catherine Parr had. And the wall was warm. Warmer than a wall has any right to be at 3 in the morning in early March. And under my palm, just barely, I felt something that I can only describe as a pulse. Slow, deep, steady. The wall had a heartbeat. I pulled my hand away and looked at my palm. It was flushed, pink, almost red, as though the blood had rushed to the surface of my skin. And I felt, and this is the part that frightens me more than anything else, I felt good. I felt rested. I felt calm. I felt the way you feel after a long run or a deep sleep, or the first warm day of spring. I felt nourished. The house was feeding me. Or I was feeding the house. Or we were feeding each other. I didn't know. I still don't know. But the feeling was unmistakable, and it was not unpleasant. And that was the most terrifying part. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept listening to the recording. Over and over. I memorized every word, and I began to notice changes. Not in the house, in me. I was sleeping better than I had in years. My back pain, which I'd had since my late 30s, was gone. Just gone. Ellen's chronic migraines, which she'd suffered since college, had stopped. She commented on it. She said, "I think this house agrees with me." She said it lightly, with a little laugh, but she put her hand on the wall when she said it. She'd started doing that. I didn't tell her I'd noticed. I weighed myself. I'd gained 4 pounds, but I looked leaner. My clothes fit the same. When I pressed my fingers into my forearm, the muscle felt denser, harder, like something underneath was becoming more solid. I went back to the county records office. I found Arthur Maron's obituary. It was brief. He'd died of cardiac arrest at his home at the age of 68. His home was listed as 9 Hargrove Lane. He lived on the street. He'd built the street, and then he'd lived on it. But the obituary had one line that stopped me. Mr. Maron is survived by his work, which continues, not his legacy. His work, which continues. I went to 9 Hargrove Lane. It was directly across the street from us. A woman named Margaret Tolliver lived there. She'd been there since 2004, the year after Maron died. She was the first person to move into that house after him. She answered the door before I knocked. "You've been asking questions," she said. She didn't seem angry. She seemed tired. And something else, concerned. The way you're concerned about a child who keeps touching a hot stove. "I found a recording in my wall," I said. "David Callahan," she said. Not a question. You know about it. David lived in your house for 11 years. He was meticulous, careful, smart. She paused. He was also wrong. Wrong about what? About the fear. He was afraid, and being afraid made him unable to understand what Arthur built. She stepped back from the door. "Come inside." I don't know why I went in. Every rational alarm in my head was sounding. But my body moved forward, as though the house had made the decision for me. And I realized as I crossed the threshold that my body had been making a lot of decisions lately that my mind hadn't authorized. Margaret's house was identical to mine in layout. Same floor plan, reversed. But it felt different. The air was thicker, warmer, and the smell, the copper smell, was stronger, richer, almost sweet, like blood, but not like blood, like the memory of blood, like what blood would smell like if blood were a living thing that had its own feelings. She led me to the living room, sat me in a chair. She didn't offer me anything to drink. She just sat across from me and looked at me the way a doctor looks at a scan. "Arthur Maron was not a normal man," she said. "He was a structural engineer before he was a developer. But before that, he was something else. He spent 12 years in Southeast Asia, Cambodia mostly. He studied things there that don't have names in English. Things about structures, about how buildings and people can exist in a relationship that goes deeper than occupancy. He believed, and he proved to his own satisfaction, that a building can be designed to bond with the people inside it, not metaphorically, physically, biologically." I said nothing. "The channel in the walls is not empty," she said. "It was never empty. Arthur seeded it during construction. With what? I don't entirely know. Something biological. Something that grows, slowly, over decades. It feeds on the thermal energy of the house and the bioelectric presence of the occupants, and in return, it provides, it repairs, it optimizes. It has been doing this since 1987. "That's insane," I said. But I said it without conviction, because I could feel the truth of it in my denser muscles, and my vanished back pain, and Ellen's absent migraines, and the 4 pounds of lean mass I'd gained while eating less. "David Callahan was terrified," Margaret continued. "He made his recording and hid it in the wall, and he moved away. But he's not well. I check on him. He lives in an apartment in Greenville now. He doesn't sleep. His back pain returned within a month of leaving. He's lost weight. He looks 10 years older than he is. The house was taking care of him, and he ran from it. What happens?" I said slowly. "If you stay?" She smiled. and her smile was warm and genuine, and it reached her eyes. But her eyes had that same flatness I'd seen in Catherine Parr and Phil Gerber and Ray Calloway, that smooth, screenless quality, like a window with nothing behind it. "You become part of the street," she said. "You belong to it. It belongs to you. You're healthier, happier, more rested than you've ever been. You don't age the way other people age." Ray Calloway is 73. You've seen him. He looks 55. It was true. I'd noticed that about Ray. I'd assumed good genetics. And in return, I asked. "You stay," she said simply. "You don't leave. You don't talk about it. And once a week, when the walls speak, you listen. And if someone does leave, they decline," she said, slowly, like a transplant patient whose body rejects itself. David is declining. He has maybe 3 or 4 years at the rate he's going. He could come back. He could reverse it. The house would take him back. It's not vindictive. It's not even intelligent, not in the way we mean. It's symbiotic. It wants to continue. That's all any living thing wants. I sat there for a long time. The house hummed around me. Not audibly, but I could feel it in the chair, in the floor, in the warm air on my skin. It felt like being held. And that was when I realized the most terrifying thing about all of it. I didn't want to leave. Not the conversation, not the house, not the street. The thought of leaving Hargrove Lane, of packing up our things and moving to a normal house with dead walls and cold insulation and no heartbeat in the drywall, made me feel physically ill. My stomach clenched. My hands went cold. My vision narrowed at the edges. The same reaction you'd have if someone told you they were going to remove one of your organs. I drove home. I sat in my garage. I picked up the recorder and I listened to David's voice again. And this time I heard something I hadn't heard before. Underneath his words, underneath his careful, rational recounting of facts, I heard grief, not fear. Grief. The grief of a man who loved something he couldn't accept, who was taken care of by something he couldn't understand, who ran because running felt like the human thing to do, even though staying was what every cell in his body wanted. That night, I lay in bed beside Ellen. At 2:51 a.m., the sound came, the single, slow stroke up the wall. Ellen sighed in her sleep and pressed her back against the warm, dry wall. And I lay on my side facing the wall, and I pressed my palm flat against it. And the pulse was there, steady and slow, synchronized with my heart. And the copper smell folded over me like a blanket. And I felt nourished, and I felt held, and I felt a gratitude so deep it didn't have a bottom. And that is where the horror lives, for me. Not in the walls, not in the channel, not in whatever Arthur Merrin grew inside the bones of these houses 40 years ago. The horror lives in the fact that I know. I know with the clear, cold, rational part of my mind that is growing quieter every day, that this is not right, that a house should not breathe, that a wall should not have a pulse, that I should not feel this way, that the calmness in my body is not peace, it's compliance, that the health is not a gift, it's a leash, that the reason nobody leaves Hargrove Lane is not because they don't want to, but because wanting to leave has been quietly, gently, lovingly removed from them. I know all of this, and I don't care. That's the truth. That's the part I can't get around. I don't care. I feel good. Ellen feels good. My back doesn't hurt. I sleep through the night. My body is strong. The house is warm. The street is quiet. The neighbors are kind. And once a week, in the middle of the night, something alive inside my walls strokes upward toward the ceiling, and I feel it move through me like a lullaby. And I am grateful. I'm making this recording because David made one, and because somewhere in me, in the part that is still mine, in the part that hasn't been soothed into silence, I know that someone should be warned. But I also know that I'm going to put this in the wall, and I'm going to seal the drywall, and I'm going to paint over it, and I'm going to go back to bed. And the next person who finds it will listen, and they will feel what I feel, and they will make their own recording, and they will put it in the wall. And the wall will be warm, and they will stay. I am staying. The address is 4 Hargrove Lane. The street is Hargrove Lane. There are 16 houses. They were built in 1987 by a man named Arthur Maron. They are alive. If you're hearing this, you are inside one of them. You probably already feel it. You probably already don't want to leave. That's how you know it's already too late.